So you have x and y. So you have a collection of 10 values here. X, it has 0, 1, 2, up to 9. Y, we have these values 0, 2, 4, 6, and so forth. So now the question is, how can you find a relationship between x and y? So how can you write y in terms of x by looking at these samples? So can anyone say how you can write y in terms of x here by looking at these samples?
Y is equal to ax plus b.
Y is equal to
Y is equal to 2x.
2x, sorry. Y is equal to 2x. It can be.
y is equal to 2x. Yes, okay, good. So by looking at this data, we were able to find a relationship between y and x. What about this example here? How can you write y in terms of x?
Y equal to 2x plus 1.
Y is equal to 2x plus 1. Okay, good. So we can also write it like 1 plus 2x. It doesn't matter. So this is the relationship. What about this example, x and y?
Y is equal to x square.
Y is
Y is equal to x square. Good. So y is equal to x square. So what about this example here, x and y? So now that's not easy, right? Because in all the previous examples, we were able to look at these samples. We were able to do some sort of a pattern recognition intuitively, and we were able to associate a relationship between y and x just by looking at these 10 samples. So by, say for example, what is the advantage of finding a relationship between y and x here? So if we think that, what we have done now is we have compressed this data in terms of an equation. So if we know this equation, we can generate this data as well as any number of data that shares such property. So you can generate infinite number of data if you know this equation. So this, another interpretation is this data comes from this equation. Or equivalently, you can say these data can be generated using this equation. So that is one important insight. So given a data, you wanted to represent them using an equation, or you are going to find a relationship between them. Since these were simple, you could quickly come up with this equation. But in such scenarios, it is not always possible. So in real life scenarios, that kind of data that you get, it is very difficult to intuitively find out a pattern and come up with a equation or a relationship between x and y. So we need some well-established technique to find a relationship between x and y. Many a times it happens that we cannot find the exact relationship, but what we can do is find the best relationship, the best possible relationship between x and y, because you only have a sample data here. You might not be able to find out what equation has generated this data exactly, because you only have a small sample from here. So what you can do is you can try to approximate. So you think of it like there is some universal equation which generated this data. You cannot actually find that, but you can sort of find an approximation to that equation which could have generated this data. And if you look at this specific example, it was generated using this equation 4 plus 3 times x. So that's how it is related. And on top of that, there is also some noisy value. So when such noisy values comes in, it is impossible for us to quickly come up with some sort of intuition behind what equation it could have generated this. And we expect that our real life data collections involves a noise factor as well. So given only these data, if we can find an approximation of what equation could have generated this data, that means you can predict infinite number of data with similar properties. Say for example, discard about these specific values in terms of units. Assume that x is the weight of the participant, and y is the height of the participant. And by looking at some 10 samples, you are sort of trying to find out how height is related to the weight of a participant. And that is what the equation that you are generating here. Then for any new weight that you give, this equation will give us an approximate height corresponding to that particular weight. So this is the idea behind representing the data using an equation. So in a linear regression or in a regression problem, what we are actually trying to do in terms of a mathematical insight, what we are trying to do is, given the data, to be more specific, the training data, we are trying to pick an equation that could have generated this data. So that's the whole idea. And the relationship between these y and x is considered, is this our equation which generates this data. So this is an important insight that we need to do, and this is from an equation point of view, but we can also have a geometric interpretation for this. So why I am saying so many different interpretations is that one of that could help you to gain a very good insight behind what we are actually trying to achieve using machine learning. So this is a very useful insight. So we can even have some visualizations. You can actually plot these data in a space. So it can represent every value is a point in a space, and this could be a geometry that goes through all those points. It will go through all those points. So this is the geometry fitting interpretation as well. So I will also explain that inside. But this is the essential intuition. Given the data, we are trying to find an equation that could have generated this data, or we are trying to formulate or finding the relationship between them using an equation. And why that is helpful? Because it helps in predicting. And the sole purpose of machine learning is to learn some useful information and make predictions. That is the idea behind machine learning. And using those prediction capabilities, we can do automation tasks as well. So coming to linear regression, so now if we talk about linear regression, we can ask, is there something called non-linear regression as well? And the answer is yes. So there are also techniques that do non-linear regression. And in tomorrow's class, we will be looking at those concepts about decision trees, bagging and boosting. And even in a later session, you will be looking at support vector machine, which all has the capability to do non-linear regression as well. But to start with, we are only going to look at linear regression. And let us try to understand the principles behind those machine learning techniques. And extending it to non-linearity is not a complicated process. So before getting into trying to understand about linear regressions, there are a couple of terminologies that we need to be familiar with. So let us take this equation y is equal to 3 plus 2x, some equation. And in this, x is referred to as independent variable and y is referred to as the dependent variable. So we need to understand about what do you mean by independent variable, what do you mean by dependent variable. In this expression y is equal to x square minus 2x, we see that there are two terms here, but there is only one variable, which is x. So we only have one independent variable, and y is referred to as a dependent variable. In this equation, z is equal to 5x square plus 8y cube. There are two different variables onto the right side, x square, x and y, which is our independent variable, and z is our dependent variable. So the intuition is that here in this place x or this x and y, they are free to choose any value. So here, for example, x is free to choose any value. Based on what x chooses, the value of y depends on that. So that is why y is called dependent and x is called independent. So these are some terminology that you will quite often encounter, and this is something specific, straight away from the mathematics. So what we did previously, we had a collection of x and y values in the previous table, in the simple pattern recognition example that we saw. we had a collection of x and y, and they could be related like this: y is equal to 3 plus 2x. If they are related like this, they are called linear. If you have a collection of x and y, if it is related to something like x square minus 2x and so forth, then these are actually non-linearity. So these all are non-linear, so these are linear. But let us focus on these kind of linear relationships. So finding the relationship between a dependent and an independent variable is also referred to as a regression problem. So once you can finding a relationship between x and y means you are actually generating an equation. So that is called relationship. So that process is referred to as regression as well. So we have just seen multiple interpretations for regression. And in these examples, the first two equations that you see here, there is only one independent variable. But when you look at the third expression, there are two independent variables. So in a regression analysis where we wanted to find the relationship between dependent and independent, if there is only one independent variable, we refer to that as univariate regression analysis, because there is only one independent variable. That is what we refer to as univariate analysis. If you have more than one independent variable, we refer to that as multivariate regression analysis, if we are to find the relationship between two independent variable and one dependent variable. So we have that two different terminologies: univariate analysis as well as multivariate analysis. And predominantly, it is the case that you will only have one dependent variable. And if you ask, are there situations where you can have even multiple dependent variables? To be more specific, it is possible. But mostly to start with, let us discuss only scenarios where we have only one dependent variable. So we are dealing with univariate and multivariate in terms of the number of independent variables only. So that's what I am trying to explain here. One independent variable and more than one independent variable. You just focus on these terms, univariate and multivariate. So it's very helpful. And whatever data that we have, say for example, these data that I have shown here, the x and y, you can actually plot them. So if you have an x-axis and y-axis, so these pair becomes a coordinate. So you can actually plot them as a point. So what you can do here is that an x and y, you can actually plot them as a cloud of points. So any data that you have can be we can also geometrically visualize. Since this is a univariate, so we could visualize it. If you are dealing with multiple variables, there is a limitation to how you can visualize. But you can actually do all mathematical manipulations with high dimensional data. That is the beauty of linear algebra. So the entire study of linear algebra aspect in machine learning is to deal with all these multi-dimensional data as well as the matrix operations that we apply on it. So here for the simple case, for a univariate linear regression where you only have one independent variable and one dependent variable, here what we have done is we have simply plotted the data set. In the previous example, I was showing you only 10 samples, but let us say using this particular equation, I added some random noise and I generated 100 such data here. So what I'm doing is that I'm just simply plotting it in a graph, all those 100 values in a graph. For now, if you want to artificially associate a problem statement to this, you can think of it like predicting the height of a participant by looking at the age of a participant, or you can say by looking at the weight of a participant and so forth. So you can associate a problem statement like this. Another problem statement that you can think of it like along the x-axis or the values is the diameter of a pizza or a diameter of a cake, and how does the price varies as you increase or decrease the diameter of a pizza or a diameter of a cake and so forth. So these are such values. So you can artificially associate some relevant problems, and then we can follow the discussion. So it is left to us. So let me just associate weight of a participant versus height of a participant. So given the weight, can you predict the height? So I will associate this data something like this. So instead of age, let's say I am using weight as an example and predicting the height. So the machine learning practices, so let us say, for example, in this FTP, we have 100 participants. So from all the 100 participants, I collect their weight information, and I also measure their height, and I record their height information as well. So for all the 100 participants, I have their weight and height information. That information, I can plot it like this. So this is plotted using a library called Matplotlib. So you need to be proficient with all those to do such visualizations. So if you wanted to learn those, you need to spend some time on reading through the documentations and tutorials related with all those associated libraries. In these lectures, we can only give insights about the concepts. We cannot actually go through all the libraries explanation or these third-party scientific library explanations. So that is left to the participants to take it up as a task and learn it. So the practice that we usually use in machine learning is that once you have your data collected from, say for example, in this example, we collect from all the participants, then we have to split the data into two parts. One part is called training data and the other part is called the testing data. And the usual practice is that for our given data, 80% of the data will be used for training purpose, and the remaining 20% is used for testing. So from your original data, what we will do is that we will randomly pick 80% of the points for training, and the remaining is left as testing. So if you combine these two, you will get the original data. So all these green dots here are training data set, and all the red dots here are the testing data set. So that is this is some sort of intuition that you should keep in mind. And it is very essential to also understand that we pick samples in random for training and testing. So it is not like the first 80 samples are used for training and the remaining 20 is used for testing. We usually do not follow such practice. We randomly pick samples, 80% for training, the remaining is left for testing. So this is a practice. So what is the use of this training data set? Using this training data set, we derive useful information from these data. And in our context, we can think of it like we are determining the transformation parameters from these data. And using the testing data set, we evaluate the model to see how good those transformation parameters are in predicting the height of the participant. And what we expect is that those transformation parameters or model parameters should predict the height very much close to the actual height of the participant. So that is our expectation. So we will also look at how do we evaluate a model as well. So the geometric interpretation, which I was saying, say for example, in the previous place, we saw this as an equation, 4 plus 3x plus epsilon. So this epsilon is also some noise, it is some value. So 4 and those noise will also add up. So you essentially have y is equal to some 4 plus 3x sort of an expression. And if you geometrically see what does that equation represents, then it represents the equation of a straight line. So you can think of it like y is equal to c plus mx. So that is the standard equation for a straight line. So that mx part is this. The c is nothing but this 4 plus epsilon part. Or if you even discard this noisy term, if you just look at y is equal to 4 plus 3x, then y represents the c-intercept, the y-intercept, and 3 represents the slope of the straight line. And y is equal to 4 plus 3x represents the equation of the straight line. So that is the geometric interpretation. So how does it fit with the regression analysis? If you look at that, what we do is that for this training data set, we are trying to find different straight lines that goes through on an average all the points of our training data set. That is the geometric interpretation. Or equivalently, we need to find a straight line that best represents these data. So if you are searching for the equation of a straight line is a linear geometry. So we refer to that as a linear regression. And the data that we see here, on an average, it also appears linear because as x is increasing, y is also increasing. So that is why we call this as a linear data. So if you have a linear data, we will try to fit a linear geometry for those. And in this example, the linear geometry happens to be a straight line. So we can ask the question, whether this straight line best represents this data. So if we look at that, it doesn't seem like, because in this region, the straight line is representing those data, but all these regions are not represented by this straight line. So the straight line doesn't seem to be a good representation of these data. So what about this equation, this straight line? So if you look at that, it seems okay, but we feel like there could have been another line that could best represent the data, right? Because it is also missing few of these data. If we think about this line, it also seems like, no, it doesn't seem to be a best representation. We could still go for a better straight line. And now if we look at this particular blue line, it seems like, yeah, it seems okay. So it is sort of best representing, on an average, it is representing all these points. So by visually looking at this, we can say that out of all these possible straight lines, this blue line seems to be best representing the data. And we know all the equations can be represented, all these straight lines can be represented using an equation. And the equation of this blue line is the one that we expect that that could have generated these green dots. That's what our intuition is. So we are trying to fit a geometry to the data distribution or the point cloud we have with us. So this, sometimes we quite often hear this term fitting. So by a geometric interpretation, you can see like we are trying to fit a geometry that best represents these data. So if we assume this blue line as best representing, then we can actually test it with our testing data and see how good it is representing. So here I'm talking about fitting a straight line. But what if our data looks something like this? So here, this doesn't seem like a linear data. Why? See here, so let's say as x is increasing, so assume this is x-axis and here vertical it is y-axis. As the x is increasing, in this region we see a trend, y is increasing. But further down, if you are again increasing x, y is decreasing. So what we see here is that as x increases, y increases for a certain time and then again decreases and maybe again it increases and so forth. Then it is referred to as a non-linear data. So if you have such non-linearity, if you try to fit it with a linear geometry, you will never be able to best represent the data. So in that case, what we need to fit a non-linear geometry. So a non-linear geometry here could be a curve. So we need to find for the equation of a curve that best represents the data. So best representing means on an average it goes through, or best represents, on an average it goes through all those points. So that is the idea, but we are not going to look at the example of non-linear fitting, but we are going to look at this sort of a linear fitting, and we assume that the data we have is also linear. So now, looking at these visually, we can say out of these 4 lines, this blue line is good. That is our capability of visually interpreting it. But if we ask, a computer program to find out of these four possible lines, what is the best line. Then we need to come up with some criteria or a strategy to decide out of these possible lines, which is the best representing line. So in that case, what would be the strategy? So how do we define that strategy so that a computer program can automatically find out of all these possible lines, this blue line is the best line. So the strategy is defined like this. So what we do is that let us assume we pick the blue line now. So how many green dots we have? If we originally had 100 points, 80% is taken as training data. So we will have 80 points here. So what we will do is that we will find the Euclidean distance between this green dot to this blue line. So if we find a distance, say for example, you get a distance d1 here. You can find another distance of this dot to this blue line. So you get another distance d2. Likewise, you find the distance, Euclidean distance d3, d4, d5. Here I have shown it for 5 samples, but what essentially we have to do is we have to find the distance for all the 80 samples. If a green dot is lying exactly on top of this blue line, then the Euclidean distance is 0. So what is the interpretation of this distance? So we interpret this distance as error in representing those data by this blue line. So that is what this distance is essentially capturing. So it is capturing an error. So now the criteria is, so when we add up, if we have 80 points, we would have 80 distance. So let us add all those 80 distance. So you will end up with a total distance of this. We can interpret those distance as errors. So we will have a total error in representing these points by this blue line. So we will end up with a total distance for a blue line. Since there are 80 samples, we can also average that distance. So you sum up all those 80 distances and divide it by 80, so you get an average distance, or you can also call it as an average error. So you have an average error for the blue line. Do the exactly same thing for the another line. So you have this dashed line, find those distance. So you will have 80 distance corresponding to this dashed line. So you have a total distance, or equivalently we can call it as a total error. We can also average it. So you have an average error. So for every line, there is an average error. So the criteria is pick that line for which the average error is minimum. So that is the best representing straight line. So that is the criteria that we can actually code it and ask the program to find out of a possible straight lines, what is the best representing straight line. The criteria is find out all those distances, add them, average distance. The distance is interpreted as error. And for all the straight lines, estimate that average error. And then pick that line for which the average error is minimum. That is assumed to be the best representing straight line. Another interpretation is, so this is the equation that could closely generate all these green points. So that is another representation. So once we end up with that best representing line, then we can use that to check whether it is on an average representing the testing data set as well. So what the points on the, or what this blue line tells you is that given a weight information, this blue line predicts a height information. So if you just continuously give some weight information here, it will keep on predicting the height information, and if you plot it, you get this blue line. So that is the interpretation here. So for all these points, for this particular, say for this particular weight, our line has represented a height, and the actual height is also very close to it. So it means that our model is able to give a better prediction. So our model will predict the height along these blue line, and these are the actual heights, and we say that they are very much close enough. If it has predicted something like this, then we can say that our model is doing a very bad job. It is predicting a height that is not even close to the actual height and so forth. But here we can see that the predicted height is somewhat close to the actual height. So this is a reasonably good machine learning model. So the criteria, the important criteria that we use is to pick that model for which, or that straight line for which the error is minimum. And in the previous example, so here we saw, right, there are 4 different straight lines that we can draw, and out of which we need to pick the best line. So every straight line can, in the machine learning terminology, we call this as a hypothesis. So this straight line is a hypothesis, which could, hypothesis means we are assuming this could be the best representing line. So that is a hypothesis. This is another hypothesis. We are assuming this could be a best line. This is another hypothesis. So here we have 4 hypotheses. And our task is to choose the best hypothesis. That means this blue line is the best hypothesis for us now. And in the remaining part of my lectures, I will not be using those terminology like hypothesis and so forth, but the intuition is the same. So wherever you read about hypothesis, it is nothing but it is one set of possible value, possible solution is called hypothesis. But there could be several possible solutions, out of which we need to pick the best solution. So that is important aspect. So here we are trying to fit the linear geometry. So it is a straight line equation that we are talking about. So when you represent a straight line, we represent it like y is equal to c plus mx. Another intuition is that C is called the y-intercept. That means where the straight line touches the y-axis. So that is this y-intercept, and this m, or this slope, tells you the inclination of this line. So by changing C, what we are doing is we are moving this straight line up and down. So for various values of C, we will have various, the line moves up and down. For various values of m, the line's inclination changes. So by changing C and M, you can come up with several different possible straight lines with different y-intercept and different slope. And we need to find for what particular value of C and M, this straight line is best representing the data. So that is the intuition. So this is what mathematically we write, y is equal to c plus mx, and mostly in all classical machine learning techniques. So by classical machine learning, what I mean is anything other than deep learning based approach or artificial neural network based approach, everything can be generally classified as a classical machine learning approach. So in classical machine learning terminology, all the model parameters are referred using this theta notation. So here we are representing this equation mathematically using the equation of a straight line. So this theta 0 is nothing but this C, this particular term C. The M can be represented using another theta notation, which is nothing but theta 1. So this is C plus mx kind of representation. Here we represent it as theta 0 and theta 1. So this is the classical machine learning practice. And instead of simply writing it as y, we usually refer it as y hat to say that this is the predicted value. In our problem setting, you can think of it like x is the weight of the participant and y hat is the predicted value of the participant. And y is the actual height of the participant. So this is what we usually follow the convention. So this theta 0 is theta 0 and theta 1, they are referred to as model parameters or transformation parameters. So this is what in the initial block diagram, I represent it like C0, C1 and so forth. So here it is theta 0 and theta 1. This theta 0 is referred to as intercept, so which is the y-intercept. In artificial neural network or deep learning domain, we refer to this as bias. So we call it as bias. So intercept or bias, it's all the same thing. And these theta 1, theta 2, and so forth, they are referred to as coefficients, because this is theta 1 is the coefficient of x, so that is why we refer to that as coefficient. So this, if you know, given the weight to predict the height information, if you know the appropriate values for theta 0 and theta 1, then this is referred to as a machine learning model. So the knowledge of theta 0 and theta 1, it is referred to as a machine learning model. So you have your machine learning model with you. So that is the idea. So this is the case where you only have one input attribute. But you can, in problems, you can have multiple input attributes as well. So in that case, we will be dealing with multivariate analysis. If you have only one independent variable, then this is a univariate analysis. So you can extend that x1, x2 up to xn. Say, for example, x1 is the weight of the participant, x2 is the age, x3 is the gender, x4 is some demographic information. So you can keep on extending the attributes. Then you will end up with this multivariate analysis. And y hat is the predicted value. So this is the predicted height, for example. So n is the total number of features that you're dealing with. These are your input attributes, xi's. And thetas are the model parameters that you wanted to estimate. And this theta 0 is has a special name. You can either refer it as intercept, or you can call it as bias term as well. This is the expanded representation, like theta 0 plus theta 1, x1, theta 2, x2, and so forth. But for a bit more compact representation, what we usually see in research papers or in textbooks is not this expanded term, but a vectorized notation that we see. So we usually see it like theta transpose dot x. Many times since this dot is a redundant to use, so we do not even use this dot. We simply write it as theta transpose x. That is nothing but this is the hypothesis. So h of theta means this is the hypothesis. So this is also the term that we usually use in the theory. But we quite often see this term theta transpose x. Even when you are entering into deep learning, also you will see W transpose x. So what it means this particular expansion. So it is compactly represented as theta transpose x. I will also quickly show you how those two are same. If you are not familiar with that operation, I will also quickly tell you how theta transpose x is equivalent to theta 0 plus theta 1 x1, theta 2 x2, and so forth. So these two are equivalent. Theta transpose x and this theta 0, theta 1, theta 2, and so forth is equivalent. So to understand that in detail, so let us say theta is a variable, or you can see it is a vector representation. So it's a column vector which encompasses the values theta 0, theta 1, theta 2, and so forth. So we call this column vector as theta. And for all those input attributes, like x1 is the weight of the participant, x2 is the age of the participant, and so forth, we represent all those as a column vector, and we call it as x. So this is theta is a column vector name, and x is another column vector name. And the values it holds has a specific meaning. So this is holding the parameter, model parameter values, and this is holding the input attributes. We are adding here an additional x0, but we say theta 1 is coefficient of x1, theta 2 is coefficient of x2. But now if we ask to what theta 0 is coefficient of, because we don't have a term x0 here, but instead, if you think in terms of theta 0 also as a coefficient, then it is the coefficient of 1. So the value of x0 should exactly be 1. In that case, all these terms can be represented as x. All these thetas can be represented as a column vector. So now if you have n attributes, you will essentially have n plus 1 model parameters. For this theta 0 is also an additional parameter. So we just call p as the total number of size for these vectors. So we just call it as n plus 1. What do you mean by transpose? So here we have a transpose term. So what does transforms do? It interchanges rows and columns. So if you have a column vector which is p cross 1, if you look at theta transpose, it becomes 1 cross p because the rows and columns are interchanged. So now it looks like a row vector. Here it looked like a column vector. Now it became, the transpose is a row vector. Theta 0, theta 1, theta 2, and so forth. So now let us go back. So what we are interested in, we need to obtain a dot product between theta transpose and x. So that's the notation that we quite often see. So theta transpose is a row vector, x is a column vector. And what is the dimension? So by this dot product, what we are essentially doing is a matrix multiplication. So when we want, so here it means we wanted to apply a matrix multiplication between theta transpose and x. When you wanted to multiply two matrices, there is an important rule to be taken care of. So if you wanted to multiply two matrices, then the number of column of the first matrix and the number of row of the second matrix should be same. Otherwise, we won't be able to multiply them. So if you take your first matrix is an m cross n matrix and your second matrix is an n cross p matrix, then when you multiply these two, what will be the order of the resultant matrix? So it will be m cross p. So when you multiply m cross n and n cross p, the resultant matrix will be m cross p. And coming to this particular place, if we ask, will we be able to multiply these two matrices? So this is a row vector and this is a column vector. Can we multiply these two is the question. So can we do a matrix multiplication? So let us analyze the order of the matrix. So what is this? You have one row and p columns. So this is one row and p columns. When you look at x, it is p rows and one column. So now the number of column of the first matrix and the number of row of the second matrix is same. So we will be able to multiply. So the result will be and 1 cross 1. And what is 1 cross 1? It is just a scalar value. So when you are doing these dot product between these two vectors, you end up with a scalar value. So that's what we are essentially happening here. But let us look at what do you mean by performing matrix multiplication. So if you take this theta transpose and x, what we do is that we will take theta 0. So we take the first element of the first row and multiply it with the first row of the second matrix. And then you take the second column of this matrix and multiply it with the second row of this matrix and then sum it up. This is the matrix multiplication rule. So we will do theta 0 times 1 plus theta 1 times x1 plus theta 2 times x2 and so forth up to theta n times xn. So now you know how theta transpose dot x is exactly equivalent to this expansion, theta 0 plus theta 1 x1 plus theta 2 x2 and so forth. So always think when you see this term theta transpose x or w transpose x, a transformation is happening to your input. So the transformation is applied or made by these model parameters that is stored in this vector or in this row vector. So this is the representation. So you will quite often see this representation theta transpose x. So whenever you see this in your mind, you should expand it like theta 0 plus theta 1 x1 theta 2 x2 and so forth. Then it will be very easy for you to follow it up. So now this is our machine learning model. So given an input attributes, you multiply it with the model parameters and you get the prediction. That is how you should read this equation. This is your input, you multiply it with the model parameters and you get the prediction y hat. And initially we talked about a criteria. Say if you have multiple lines, how do we pick the best line? So we saw about estimate that Euclidean distance or the error of all the training samples. We add all those total error. If you want, we can also average it. So you can estimate the average error. So for all different straight lines, we have to estimate that average error. So how do we mathematically represent that? So that if finding the Euclidean distance, it is sort of a squared distance that we are estimating. So we will estimate first a squared error. So what is y hat? This is the predicted value. What is this y? This is the actual value. This I represents for the ith instance. So if you have 80 samples, that means you have 80 participants. And for the ith participant, this yi is the actual height of the participant, and this y hat I is the predicted height of the ith participant. So that is how we should understand. So we are finding a difference between these two that gives us the error, and we will square it. For every participant, if you have 80 participants, then for every 80 participants, find the difference between the predicted height and the actual height, which is the error, and then we just square it up. So there is a significance behind why we are squaring this error, because it helps us avoid adding up negative values. Say, for example, for the first participant, the error is -5. And for the second participant, if the error is +5, if you simply add it, it becomes 0. It tells you that there is no error, but that is not the case. So that is why you need to take square to avoid that summing up of negative positive errors. But to avoid summing up those negative positive errors, instead of taking square, we could have taken also the absolute values. In that case, we could have avoided adding up negative and positive values. But absolute errors are not the preferred choice, but squared error is a preferred choice, because there are also other reasons why we should choose squared errors. That will be obvious when we go forward and discuss in a later lecture. But let me tell you one more reason. The reason why we go for squared error is that it gives us convexity property to our equation. And what do you mean by convex functions? I will explain in a later lecture. But for now, we are squaring the error, we are adding it up. So we essentially end up with squared error. So this is nothing but finding the distance between a green dot and a possible straight line. So it could be a dashed straight line, or it could be that blue line, and so forth. So this is the total distance. If you have 80 samples, we would get 80 distances or errors. And if we just divide it by, so this is the total error. So this is the predicted value, actual value. This is called error, or sometimes it is also referred to as residual. And if you average it, then it is called the mean squared error. If you do not average it, this is called the squared error. If you just average this error, then it is called the mean squared error. So this mean squared error is referred to as the objective function. So this y hat can also be replaced with this theta transpose x. The y hat can be replaced with this theta transpose x. So here we have not included that dot notation, but this is nothing but our machine learning model. So this is the height predicted by our machine learning model. This is the actual height of the ith person. So that is how we should read this equation. And when you look at this particular expression, we know what is the value of x, because this is the input that you give. We know what is the actual height of the participant. What we do not know is these theta values. These are the unknowns. So what is our objective in this particular expression is find those values of theta which minimizes this error. So when we are thinking in terms of minimization, we refer to those objective functions as a loss function or a cost function, because our aim is to minimize the cost or minimize the loss or minimize the error. So this is our objective function for regression analysis, and predominantly for regression analysis, mean square error is the objective function we use. And mathematically, the question that is posed here is find the value of theta. By theta, you should remember theta as a column vector which contains theta 0, theta 1, theta 2, and so forth. And that is our model parameter. So we need to find those values which minimizes this expression. And luckily, in a result from linear algebra is that there is a closed form solution for this expression. That means instead of trying to locate different straight lines, so we try, for example, we could try 4 different straight lines, 3 dot dashed lines and a blue line. And then we can write a rule out of which one is having the minimum error. But the beauty here is that there is a closed form solution, which means you can exactly find out that blue line without even trying those dashed lines. And that is called normal equation. So what this normal equation means, it is the closed form solution. So you can find the best value of theta just by plugging in the training data set. So this x and y are nothing but the training data set. These are the weight information, and y is the actual height information. So if you just plug it in inside this particular expression, x transpose dot x, the whole inverse dot x transpose dot y. So this is the equation. We don't actually need to go to the derivation of how this expression was derived, but this can be derived from this equation by taking the first derivative and equating it to 0 and solve for theta. We get this expression. So that is how we obtained, but we don't need to go through the derivation. So this is a closed form solution, and our many machine learning tools also uses the closed form solution to find the best model parameters. Even scikit-learn internally uses the normal equation to find the best model parameters depending on some scenario. There are some contexts where this equation is used, and there are contexts where the gradient based approach is used. So I will explain about under what situation this is not feasible. So we will discuss that later. But as of now, you think there is a closed form solution and you can find the best model parameters. And once you have the best model parameters, you have your machine learning model with you. That this is the value of theta that minimizes this expression. Then that value of theta can be estimated from this normal equation. I hope that intuition is clear. So this is our objective function. X and Y, they are our training samples. This theta is the unknown. So our question is to find those values of theta which minimizes this expression. And there is a closed form solution which straight away gives us the values of theta that minimizes this expression. And that is estimated using this normal equation, which is the closed form solution for this expression. So this is the advantage. So if you wanted to look at what is the implementation, how do we even implement? So this is the blue line that you can exactly get. The theta hat is nothing but giving the attributes of this blue line. It gives us what is the y-intercept and slope of this straight line. That is what's stored in this theta hat. So if theta hat is nothing but contains the value for theta 0 and theta 1. So if you have theta 0 and theta 1, you have this blue line. So now, so that is what I'm saying, theta 0 and theta 1 is the theta hat that is given by the closed form solution. And the y hat is nothing but the predicted value of our model. In our example, you can think of y hat as the predicted height of the participant. So now, this is the mathematics behind the regression analysis. So we need to find the best values of these model parameters that is going to best represent our training data set. So how do we actually solve or even train a model using the libraries that are available. So now we are going to just look at how we can actually solve for these model parameters using scikit-learn library. So we will have to make use of multiple scientific libraries like NumPy, Matplotlib, Pandas for reading the data from a CSV file and so forth. And then we have to call the machine learning class from the scikit-learn library as well. So this is the general programming sequence that we have to follow. So I will show you a code implementation, how we can estimate the model parameters and evaluate our machine learning model as well. So we have to use NumPy, which is a numerical Python package. So we have to import NumPy, and all these can be implemented in Google Colab, which I showed you previously. So you can take a coding cell and you can actually type it in. But what here I am going to simply explain through the code implementation and expose you to a practice that we follow in the machine learning. So currently you won't be able to implement it, but at least let us go through the code explanation and get a feel of how we can actually implement this particular model estimation using regression analysis. We have to import NumPy for numerical computations. We have to import this Pandas library for certain data analytics. So here what we are going to do is we are going to use this Pandas to read a CSV file, the data that is present in a file to load for our experiment. And we also need Matplotlib for visualization. So we will import the PyPlotting library defined inside Matplotlib for visualization. And in all machine learning based programming, you would see that many standard libraries has an alias name. So you are importing NumPy as NP. So NP is an alias name for NumPy. So wherever in the code you see NP, it will be replaced with NumPy. Wherever you see PD, it will be replaced with Pandas. So this is something relevant to fundamental Python programming about aliasing the libraries. So these are standard practices. Alias NumPy as NP, Pandas as PD, this matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. These are some standard practices, and it's highly recommended that we also follow similar practice. So even when you're looking for some community support, when you search online, you will see they also use this PLT as the alias name, or PD for Pandas and so forth. So let us stick on to that. And for when we use this Jupyter notebook or this Google Colab, what we expect is that whatever visualizations or graph we are generating, we don't want to generate that as a separate window or a child process coming out of the browser. So, but what we prefer is that show the visualization in the same notebook file itself. If you want to do that, then you have to put this percentage matplotlib inline. So this is an additional functionality related with the visualization capability. We are saying that don't open the visualizations in a new window, but rather show it in the same notebook itself. And this is recommended. And we are going to use some randomizations in our implementation. And whenever a random function is used, and if you want to have reproducibility in your results, then we need to seed our random function. The intuition behind seeding a random function will be obvious, so I will explain what is the significance behind seeding a random function. And we can seed it by giving an integer value. Here I have simply put as 42 because in all standard documentations, we see 42 as a seed, but there is no significance behind using 42. You can use any integer value you want. The randomization that we actually use in our computer programming, it is not true randomness. It is called pseudo randomness. It is based on a recursive modulo arithmetic equation. So you can search for pseudo random number generator, and you can read about the mathematical theory behind how random numbers are generated in computer programs. So it's referred to as pseudo random number generator, and it is based on a recursive modulo arithmetic equation. So what I'm trying to say is that by pseudo random number, we can always predict what is the next random number that is going to be generated. And if you wanted to keep track of the sequence of random numbers that are generated, it is predictable, and based on seed, we can actually control those sequence of random numbers that are generated. This specifically helps when you wanted to do reproducible experiments. So I will once again explain about this seeding in one more context. I will be sharing these IPython notebook, and I will be sharing this CSV file as well. So there is a univariate data.csv file which I will put it inside a data folder. So what I am doing is I am reading this CSV file using this pandas read CSV functionality. So pandas is a data analytics library, and it provides a built-in function called read_CSV to parse the CSV file. So we just specify the path of the CSV file, and it will read it, and it is stored inside its own built-in data structure. And the built-in data structure is called data frame. So data frame is a standard data structure that is used by this pandas library for data processing. So if you want to look at the first 5 entry of this data frame, you can just put dot head and it will print you the first 5 entries. So this is our x, this is our x value, this is our y value. And what we need to do is we need to find the relationship between y and x. That's what we are going to do. So this is how all the 100 value look like, because inside the CSV file, I generated 100 values and I have put it here for x and y. So this is how the data looks like. I generated using that equation y is equal to 4 plus 3x plus some random noise as well. That is how I generated this particular data. So we can think of this as our own problem statement, like taking age, predict the height, or looking at the diameter, predict the price, and so forth. Using this pandas data frame, you can also look at some descriptive statistics of the data. So out of this 100 data, you can see what is the minimum value for x and minimum value for y, what is the maximum value for x and y, what is the standard deviation, what is the average value. In total, how many values you had? So you had 100 values. What is the, so this 25%, 50% and 75%, they are referred to as quartile information. So this is called first quartile. This 50% is called second quartile. 75% is called third quartile. So the second quartile or 50% has also another very standard name called median. So 50% or the second quartile information is referred to as median in statistics. What it means is that 50% of the data is less than 0.92. That is what we interpret from this second quartile information. 50% of the value corresponding to y is less than 6.67. So that is the insight. The first quartile information says 25% of the data, they are less than 0.38. Here, if you go to third quartile, 75% of the data is less than 1.46. So that is the, so given this data frame, you can quickly look at some descriptive statistics of your data. So this, just by calling this describe function. So pandas is a very powerful data analytics library. So you can, with a single function call, you can get so many details about the data. So what we are going to do is that we are going to just pick the x and y. So I don't want to go through this because that is more pandas relevant. what we are going to do is we are just going to pick the x and y and take it as a NumPy array. So far we were dealing with the pandas data structure, but instead of dealing with pandas data structure, you can just have it as a NumPy array. So we just call x dot values and y dot values, and you end up with NumPy array. What we are seeing here is that our input is an one-dimensional data which contains 100 values. What we do is that we want to represent it as a two-dimensional matrix. So we wanted to represent it as a column vector. So there is a NumPy based manipulation which converts this into a column vector. So this is an operation to do that. I don't want to confuse you with all these intermediate data processing. So this you can pick it up as you practice more. What I wanted to say is that your input attribute has to be a two-dimensional matrix, and your output, the actual height of the participant, is an one-dimensional matrix. To get that, you will do some additional processing. So to understand more about this, you should have some proficiency with NumPy library. But let us say you have your data x and y. So now what we need to do is we need to split our data into training and testing. And that is the important part to look at. So how do we split our data into training and testing? The NumPy, the scikit-learn provides a built-in functionality, a function called train_test_split that is defined inside this scikit-learn module called model_selection. So how can we call this function to split our data? So we just discard the left-hand side. So we are calling this function. We pass our x and y, and we are asking this function to split our data x and y into 80% training and 20% testing. So how does the function know how much should be taken as training and how much should be taken as testing? For that, you have to specify an additional argument. You specify test_size argument as 0.2. 0.2 means it is 20% testing. So when you specify 20% as testing, the remaining 80% is training is obvious, and the function splits it accordingly. And train test split is a random function because, as I mentioned previously, we randomly pick the points for training and testing. So train test split implicitly uses a random function, and we wanted to seed that random function. So seeding that random function using this particular argument called random_state as 42. So we are seeding this. So the significance behind seeding this is every time you run the experiment, you get the same set of training and testing data set. That's what this train test split function will do. So what this function is going to do is that it will take x, it will split it into training and testing. So this function is essentially throwing out or returning 4 matrices. It takes x, split it into training and testing. Takes y, split it into training and testing. The percentage, the ratio is specified here. So it will take x, split it into 80% training, 20% testing. Takes y, split it into 80% training and testing. So we just catch those 4 variables. We can name it appropriately. So we just name it as x_train, x_text. So this is the splitting of x. And y_train, y_text, which is the splitting of y. So we now end up with 4 matrix, which is the split up version. So this is how it looks like. This is the training data, and this is the testing data. The 80% training, 20% testing. So this is the 80% training, 20% testing, corresponding to x and y. And once you have your training and testing data, so now the question is, how do we actually solve this using a linear regression model? So what we can do is that from the scikit-learn, we have to import the linear regression model. So inside the linear_model module, there is a class called linear regression. So this is a class. So for a class, what we have to do is we have to create an object or an instance of the class. So what we will do, we create an object for this class, linear regression. So this model is nothing but a class. It's an object of this class linear regression. So by class, it encapsulates member variables and member functions. So you can access the member variables and member functions of this class using the dot operator. So there are some predefined member variable function names and member variable and function names. So we need to access them. So now what we are doing here is that we are calling a member function called fit, using this dot operator, so model.fit, and we pass our 80% training data set. This is our x underscore train and y underscore train. And what this fit function is trying to do is that it is going to estimate that best fitting geometry. So out of all the possible straight lines, we know that blue line is the best line. So this fit will essentially locate that blue line and solves the problem. So now if you wanted to get the attributes or the y-intercept and slope of that blue line, you need to access them. So there are member variables. So there is a member variable called intercept underscore. So the dense with an underscore. There is another member variable called coef underscore. So use from this object, you can access those member variables after calling this fit function. So this is nothing but it is finding the best model parameters, and you can retrieve those best model parameters using these member variables. So this is the intercept, and this is the coefficient we are getting. So if you look at what was the original data or original equation which generated the data, this is the original equation. 4 plus 3x plus epsilon was the original equation which generated the data. But if we look at what the machine learning model has estimated, we end up with this particular expression. So this is our intercept, which is 4.14, and the coefficient is 2.79. So we can just round it like this is 4.1, this is 2.8. So based on these model parameters, we can also construct an equation like y is equal to 4.1 plus 2.8x. We can see this equation is very much close to the original equation, which was used to construct the data. But without this knowledge, just by looking at 80% training data, we were able to reconstruct or approximately reconstruct the equation that could have generated this training data set. And this is very much close to our original data. So you can see the coefficient, the original is 3, but here we came very close to that. We end up with 2.8. This part, this is 4 plus epsilon because there is an influence of noise term as well. So we were able to estimate 4.1. We cannot actually estimate an noise term separately because that is all added here with this intercept. So we can only estimate this intercept together with the noise. So this is the best approximation of the original equation that we have estimated. Was there any question?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, actually, when I went through this particular thing right now, I came to understand that the linear regression equation that you are forming is by minimizing the function that you have wrote, right? The loss function.
The loss function, yes.
Yes. So I just went through it. So in some of the books, it has been mentioned that in the loss function, the mean square error function that we have written, it is dividing the mean square, means the whole square function by some by twice of m, and some of the books by m. Means summation of the whole function divided by m, and some is dividing by twice of m. So is that because of that twice m, this kind of 4.1 and 2.8 is happening?
No, it is not. So if you just go back here, let me just go back to that error function here. So whether we minimize, even if we do not average it, whether we minimize only the squared error or we minimize the average error, or we can even take square root of this and we can call it root mean squared error. They all will lead to similar solution. So only thing is we are optimizing it in different scales. If we do not take a square root, then we are doing a mean squared error. If we do not average it, we are optimizing it on the squared error. But it is only changing the scale of the objective function where we are minimizing, but it will all lead to the similar solution. And the specific fact why a 2 is added here is because here you have a square term. When you take the first derivative of this equation, then the 2 will come, because say for example, x square is the expression. What is the first derivative of x square with respect to x? It is 2x. They wanted to cancel those two, that 2 in the numerator and in the denominator, to keep it simple. So that is why these kind of half term is used. Whether you use a half term or not, it doesn't actually matter. That is only for the convenience of writing the mathematical equation. But that is not going to influence the final result. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, yes, fine. Okay, so let me just come back here. Okay, so this is the approximation of the equation. So now we only use the training data to find these parameters, model parameters. Now we needed to see how good these model parameters is. So we need to evaluate how good our model parameters is. So we need some evaluation strategy. So one of the most prominent technique used to evaluate regression analysis models is referred to as the R-square test. It's also referred to as coefficient of determination or goodness of fit. So what this R-square test does is, the equation is like this: R square is equal to 1 minus SS residual by SS total. So this is a very standard notation. This is one of the ANOVA technique. ANOVA is a collection of statistical techniques for evaluation. ANOVA stands for analysis of variance. So R square is one of the ANOVA technique from that. So the equation for R square is 1 minus SS residual by SS total. So this SS actually stands for the sum of the square. So it's just summing up the squared error concept. So I will again explain what these SS residual and SS total actually means. So let us assume we are solving this equation for the problem the height, predicting the height of the participant, looking at the weight of the participant. So we are predicting these values by minimizing the mean squared error and finding the best model parameters. A simple solution. So can we think of another simple solution? So that is where the R square is getting into. So this SS residual is nothing but, it is defined as the difference between the predicted value and the actual value. So this is the error. You just square it up and you sum it over how many of our testing samples you have. If you have 20 testing samples, so you sum it over all the 20 testing samples. You are summing up the error. So this is yi hat is nothing but the predicted height of the machine learning model. So that machine learning model is estimated by minimizing the mean squared error. So there is a lot of work involved in estimating the machine learning model and looking at the error. And now the question, what is SS total stands for? SS residual is nothing but the error of the machine learning model in making the prediction. That is what this is capturing. SS total, what it is trying to capture is the predicting error of a simplest solution. In our problem statement, a simplest solution to our problem is, if you have 80 participants height information, what we can do is we can just average all the height of the 80 participants. So we will end up with an average height without even considering what is the weight of the participant. we can just only average the height of all the 80 participants. So we have an average height. For the remaining 20 participants, irrespective of what their weight is, we can always say their height as the average height of our training data set. That is a simplest solution that you can come up with, because we quite often adapt it in our day-to-day life itself. So let us just average it and then do that average as the solution and so forth. So that is the simplest solution for this problem. But that simplest solution will also have some error. So what SS total is capturing is the error of that simple solution, that is the average model. So what this Y bar here represent is the average height of our training data set. All the 80 participants height is average. And now for the remaining testing 20% participants, no matter what their weight is, we will always predict their height as the average height of the training data. So for every participant, there is an actual height. Our simplest model predict the height as the average height of the training data. So this error will be high eventually, because this is the simplest approach. We are simply averaging it. So now we have two types of error. One is the error corresponding to the actual machine learning model. SS total is the error corresponding to the simplest solution, which is the taking the average of the training data set. And now what is R square capturing is how good our machine learning model is with respect to the average or the simplest solution. That is what this R square is capturing. So let us assume some magic happened and our model is predicting the height of the participant exactly the same. That means for any participant, if we give weight as input to the model, machine learning model, it is giving the prediction y hat, and that is exactly equal to the actual height of the participant. In real life scenario, that is not possible, but assume it happened, some sort of magic happened, and our model is predicting the exact height of the participant. So if you look at what is the error, SS residual, what will be the total error here?
0.
0. So SS residual is 0. Let us not bother about what is the error of the average model. If we just put it in here, what will be R square value? It is 1 minus 0 divided by, so whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We will eventually end up with 1 because it is 1 minus 0. So when R square value is 1, what it means is that our model is doing an extremely good job in making the prediction of the height. That is what we should understand by looking at the value of R square. If it is 1, our model do not have any error. It is giving the exact prediction, which is not ideally possible. But let us assume if it is 1 or close to 1, our model is best performing. Let us say after going through all those mean squared error minimization and doing all those hard work, and we estimated the machine learning model. Finally, the error of the machine learning model is exactly equal to the error of the simplest solution that you can come up with. That is the predicting the average height of the participant. It doesn't matter what SS total is. If these two are exactly same, if we put it in this equation, what will happen? If these two errors are exactly same, what will be the value of R square?
0.
0. So if it is because these are exactly same, so it will be 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So if R square value is 0, it means our machine learning model is not doing any better job than the simplest model. So there is no use of going through all these hard work. So the R square value here, if you range it between 0 to 1, if R square value is 1 or close to 1, our machine learning model is doing extremely good job. If R square value is close to 0, it is not doing a good job. It is only working similar to an average model. There is no need to go through a machine learning rigorous process and so forth. So that is what the R-square evaluation tells us. So that is what the insight you should derive by looking at this equation. So it is essentially saying how good our machine learning model is compared to the average solution. And this R-square value is capturing that. If it is 1, it is extremely good. If it is close to 0, it is working only similar to the average solution. So this is what R-square essentially captures. If you wanted to look at what is the R-square value, we don't need to actually go inside and to implement this because it is already pre-built. So you just need to call this function dot score. So if you call this score function, it is actually implementing this R-square inside. So you give your testing sample, your 20% testing sample, it will actually estimate this R-square value over all your testing sample. It is 20%. So it will give you that score, which is 0.80. So this is the R-square value, which is 0.8. So 0.8 is very much close to 1. That means our machine learning model is doing at least 80% better than the simplest solution or the average solution. So 8.80 tells us that it is reliable. So it is giving a very good prediction of the height. So this is what the way we will evaluate our model. So we can say our model is 80% good. So that is the simplest interpretation. Our model is 80% accurate in terms of predicting the height of the participant by looking at the weight itself. So this is how we interpret. So what we have done here is that once we have got our data set, we split it into training and testing data set, and then we called a linear regression model. So we created its object because this is a class, and then we called a built-in function. What will this fit function implement? You can think that inside the fit function, it could have implemented that normal equation, the closed form solution that will give us straight away these theta parameter values. And we can evaluate and see how good these theta model parameters are. So it is saying 80% seems like good. We cannot exactly interpret it as percent, but to keep things simple, I'm interpreting it as percent and saying it is 80% better than the simplest solution. But now this performance of this model is based on one particular splitting of the data into training and testing. What if we have split the data differently? The green dots and red dots are different. It is the fact that the performance of a machine learning model hugely depends upon your training data set. So if your training data set changes, the performance of the model also changes a little bit. So now it is not enough you evaluate the performance of your model for this one particular splitting of your data, 80% training, 20% testing. So we needed to see if the training data slightly changes, how does the performance of the model also changes? If the performance changes drastically by changing a little bit of your training data set, it means that this particular model is not very reliable. So we needed to see whether this model is really a reliable model or not. So we need to do another level of evaluation of our model, and that is referred to as cross-validation. So by just explaining the intuition behind this cross-validation, we will wind up this session and we'll take the lunch break. So what is cross?
One question before that, sir.
Yes.
So you discussed about the R-square methodology, right? So
yes.
In the numerator part, you used the residual error over there.
Yeah, residual error. This is the error of the machine learning model. This is the error of the average model, the simplest solution.
So, sir, for drawing that particular line, means predicting that line, you were first of all using the error model, and that error model is the same as the R-square. Means in the numerator side, you are placing the same error model over there.
That error model is based on training data, but here the error is based on testing data.
Okay.
That is
why?
Okay.
And why the mean, sir? You're squaring it around the mean.
Yeah. So this is the simplest solution. So we are just taking all the training data the participants, 80 participants height, and we are just averaging the height.
Okay, okay. So
And
you are assuming that the mean, median, mode are the same, and that's why we took around the mean over here.
yeah. We just say that mean, we just do the average. We call it as an average model.
Okay, okay, okay. So for uniform distribution, this particular thing will work, I guess. If the data is a bit skewed, where mean, median, mode are all different, this will automatically prove to be some error will happen, I guess.
Then it would mean that linear model fitting is not appropriate. You might need to go for non-linear model.
Non-linear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then you need to go for a bit more rigorous machine learning models.
Okay.
So as a baseline, it is always a good practice to try a linear model and see what is the result you are getting. And then you can also try other models, and with linear result as a baseline, you can see how you are improving with respect to other models.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that will be a good practice. Okay, thanks. Yeah. So what we needed to capture is that if we slightly change the training data, will the performance of the model drastically change or not? So we need to capture that information as well to look at how trustworthy or reliable this linear regression model is for the given problem. For that, there is a well-established strategy which is called cross-validation. So we always need to perform a cross-validation of our model and see how reliable our model is. So what is the intuition behind cross-validation is this. So this helps us in judging the performance of the model by slightly changing the training data set. And that is essentially what cross-validation do. So in a cross-validation, there is a specific terminology called folding. So we say we perform 2-fold cross-validation, or we say 5-fold cross-validation, 10-fold cross-validation. So that folding is an important aspect, and I'm going to here explain what do you mean by a 10-fold cross-validation. Once you understand this, you can extend it to any number of fold. So when we wanted to perform a 10-fold cross-validation, what we will do is that we will take our training data set. I am explaining in terms of training data set, but if you want, you can also do it on the entire data set itself. So that is left to us. Here I am explaining it in terms of training data set. So we take our 80, this is our 80% training data set. Let us assume we have initially 100 participants. Then this is the 80 participants details, because 80% is our training data set. And now we perform a 10-fold cross-validation. In that case, what we do is that we divide this into 10 equal blocks. That means this is totally 80 data. So we have 8 data each in the blocks. So we have 10 blocks consisting of 8 data. In the first fold, what we will do is that we will take the first block as a validation data and use the remaining 9 blocks as the training data set. That means 9 times 8, 72 samples go as training data, and this 8 sample is used as testing data. So in a cross-validation scenario, this will be referred to as validation data set. So on a top level, we split our data into training and testing, and further we divide the training into validation and training. So this is called validation data set. So in short, we use these 9 blocks for training, use the first block for testing. With that, you will have one R-square value. So that is the case for the first fold. In the second fold, what we will do is we will take the second block as validation or internal testing, and the remaining 9 blocks as training. So in among these 2 folds, the training data is slightly different. Here also 72 samples. In the second fold also it is 72 samples, but at least 8 samples are different, because this is becoming the validation data set now. With these 9 blocks as training and this 1 block as validation, you will get another R-square value. In the third fold, we again shift it here. So we use these 9 blocks as training, the third block as validation. you will get another R square value. So if you keep on doing this, these validation blocks keeps on jumping until you reach the 10th block. So now you have 10 R square values where the training data slightly changes. The number of samples remains the same, but the sample slightly changes, at least with 8 samples. So you have 10 R square values. Now, with those 10 R square values, we can actually judge how reliable our model is when the training data slightly changes. So that's what cross validation essentially captures. So I have written down exactly what I explained it. So how we can look at the R square value of the cross validation. So there is a built-in function called cross validation score, cross underscore val underscore score defined in this module. So what you have to do is call that function, pass this model, the linear regression model, pass your training data set x underscore train and y underscore train, and perform the number of fold. So here it means perform a 10-fold cross validation. And it will return the 10 R square values corresponding to all the 10 fold. So if you print this score CV, you will see there are 10 values. What are these values? They are nothing but the R square values. So in the first fold, we even got 88% accuracy, then 83%. But if you see that at some particular place, you only got 21% accuracy. Here you see 38% accuracy. So there is a huge disparity in the performance of the model. So if you wanted to actually look at what is the reliability, you have to take the average of these 10 R square values. So you can take the mean of those 10 R square values, you get 0.65. And then you need to look at the standard deviation of this. It is 0.20. So how do we represent the accuracy of our model? So we represent the model as 0.65 plus or minus 0.21. So this is the average performance, and this is the fluctuation that you expect. So it is plus or minus 0.21 for the R square value. So if this is the fluctuation. So if this value is high, it means our model is not very reliable. The performance fluctuates a lot when the training sample changes a little bit. If the standard deviation value is very small, that means they all are very much similar. So the fluctuation is small, which essentially means that your model is very stable even when the training sample changes a little bit. So this is the final way of evaluating your model. So in many research papers, you would see an average performance with the fluctuation that you expect. And this is the right way of evaluating your model using the cross validation.